Beautiful. So like Ben mentioned, I'm using the app 53 and an iPad Pro, and I'll answer any questions that you have about this after the talk. But I want to talk about the power of drawing in visual storytelling. The original plan that I had for this talk was to walk you through a series of different napkin sketches and hand-drawn data visualizations. Some are from further back in time, some are more recent, like the Dear Data project and kind of like spin-off of Data Chain. I love this stuff. It's really cool. It's really fun to look at and to learn the stories behind it. And like, there's, huge movements have started just from an idea sketched on the back of a napkin. But I had a change of heart about wanting to share with you these stories. And this is because back in January, I was teaching a visual communication for groups workshop at the Stanford D School. And the idea behind the workshop was to get students from all different disciplines who speak all different technical languages communicating visually so that they understand each other better and they get better ideas and better collaborative processes going. And my co-instructor, Allie McKee, was walking around the room all day telling the students, focus on drawing the verb, not the noun. She was like, the verb is so much more important. And what I realized she was talking about was that it's much better for students to focus on the process of drawing itself and the benefits you gain from the verb of drawing as opposed to the outcome, which is a drawing itself, the noun form. And this is new to me because in my work, I draw both as a process to get ideas and to kind of plan and kind of get clarity and decide what I want it to finally, the outcome to finally be, but I also draw as the outcome. So sometimes it's, in the form of a sketch note, like Ben mentioned. I'll be doing those today, just not like right now. And then sometimes they're just hand-drawn data visualizations inspired by different actual chart types that I've seen online or stuff that I just kind of make up in my head to tell a story about either myself or a topic that I find interesting. But I realized this isn't going to be as useful to share about drawing the noun, and there's kind of two big reasons. The first one is anytime I work with someone, or I guess 90% of people, they're really uncomfortable when I ask them to draw their ideas. Whether it's because you're out of practice or you think you're not artistic, there's a whole kind of talk I can give on how that's not actually true. But I get it. It's kind of scary, and I know there's probably two other people here that I've talked to. Nick, who will be giving a talk later today, loves drawing. There's some other people that are into comics and stuff, but there's not a lot of us out there. And then the second reason is a lot of times drawing is just not an acceptable outcome, whether it's because it's your audience and they need to go deeper or interact with something, or your data is super complex and it just can't be summarized in a drawing. So I decided to focus on, this is from earlier today, another outcome drawing, the process of drawing to get ideas and generate them and work with other people to refine them. And I think that's something that if I share with you, hopefully you'll find something that you can apply in the work that you do. So first and foremost, I think the biggest benefit to drawing is that it eliminates the clutter and the distraction and the influence of the digital world that we live in. So I tried to draw this out. You're not looking at your phone. You're not looking at the websites that you typically follow or Pinterest or whatever. You're just looking at what's in your head and trying to externalize the internal thought process that you have. And that's where I think the most powerful and most exciting ideas come from. You can expand your ideas to your mind to new ideas and formats and products. And ultimately, the best outcome is going to be a result of that, not a result of starting from a digital format. And then the three biggest areas where I use drawing in my process are to gain clarity, to be more collaborative, and to be more creative. So I'll just go into each one of those now. And starting with clarity, this is for me, the most important phase and the most important reason that I draw. Typically when I'm starting a new project, I'm really excited about the topic or the subject or the problem that I'm trying to solve, but I'm incredibly overwhelmed by the execution of it. So I think, especially in the world of data visualization where there's new tools coming out like every month, it feels like, and new inspiring examples, it's really hard to not focus on the execution and how it's going to actually come together technically, and like how are you going to publish it and who are you going to work with and those things. But I find it's much more valuable just to start with the idea and get clear on what it is and what's interesting and how the story is going to pan out to help me kind of get to the right execution for the idea. So the first thing I do is I map my mind. I want to just establish my own understanding of what I know or what I want to know about a certain topic. So the example I have here is just why would I like to talk, or like what is interesting about drawing and data and the combination of those two things. So I start drawing that in the middle of the page, and I just kind of branch out to like a tree mind map with the basic story framework. So who, what, where, when, why, how. Then I just kind of grow it from there and add different topics and subtopics as I think about in my head, what do I know or what do I want to know about this thing? And when I feel stuck, I try to resist all urges to go to Google or something, because then this small page itself will turn into something like 10 times the size. So I'll ask someone I know to help me fill it out, but I'll just stop when the page is full, because it's just a starting point. It's just really almost like a warm-up exercise to get the creative juices flowing, and then I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is charting my ideas. Now that I've got the big picture, I like to think about what would be interesting to compare. From each of these kind of different limbs of the mind map and the tree, I'll take one or two things and just plot them out. And this is an exercise in quantity over quality. So a lot of these probably don't make much sense, or like when you actually plug in data, wouldn't really be executed well or look anything like how I've envisioned it. But just producing more and more ideas is going to, by probability's sake, make one of those things that you come up with be really exciting and really powerful. So typically when I'm thinking I'm finished, I'll challenge myself to think of like 3 or 4 more of these basic, simple charts. And eventually something or 1 or 2 of these ideas becomes even more interesting to me. So that's when I decide to go in and add depth. So I've got a lot of creative juices flowing. I want to go deeper. I ask myself, what questions could I answer to complete the picture? The way that I do this is I'll start with some of the interesting visualizations that I've kind of looked at and decide, like, okay, there's more to this, I can add layers. And I'll use all of the different available visual attributes. So if I've already used like X position and Y position, I'll add color and shape and size. Or if I've used all of the visual attributes in the static visualization, I'll start to draw in some of like the interactive components and make it look more like a wireframe. So this little clicky hand thing comes in really handy to show. I might add a filter here. It might turn into like some sort of interactive product if there's too many layers to the data and we want to make it more interesting and more explorable. So once I've got enough clarity or enough like good, deep ideas to explore with other people, and I'm not typically working in a vacuum, I want to start getting feedback at some point, I feel like this is the stage that I'm ready to do so. And I know I recognize that many of you wouldn't feel comfortable sharing your drawings, but this is the place in like the process where I'd highly encourage you just to give it a try. I think the best quote and the best research on the topic comes from Baba Shiv at Stanford. He's a neuroscientist and he writes a lot about like innovation and business, and he talks about how time after time he's seen when you show someone like a polished prototype, they're just going to point out the flaws. And I do this all the time. When people show me a work in progress, a dashboard, or some sort of visualization, and it's got missing data or text that's not formatted well or missing labels or the colors are off, it's really, really hard to focus on the story and the impact of that and not just like nitpick those little details. So even I'm guilty of this. But if you show someone a rough prototype, they'll see the potential, they'll make suggestions rather than shoot the idea down, and more importantly, they're going to help co-create this with you and build it with you in a way that gets both people involved, like really excited about it. He's not talking in his research about visual storytelling or about drawing in particular, But I can say from my experience, like 100% of the time this is true. So if you have an in-progress dashboard, but you also have a sketch drawing, and you can present that in an easy-to-understand format with like a good justification for why you wanted to explore these different areas, that's going to be so much more effective when it comes time to collaborate. So this last area, creativity, is kind of when I'm ready. I've shown some ideas, I've gotten buy-in, but I still want to envision new and different ways to visualize things. And I'm still drawing at this point because I don't want to be influenced either by the past projects that I've done, or if I've determined like what tool I'm going to use to execute it. I don't want to be influenced by those technical limitations, like if this chart type isn't available, but there's a better way to do it and I can come up with it in my head, I'm sure we'll be able to figure it out when it comes time to actually build it. So the iPad is the game changer that I see in terms of creativity and digital drawing, the format itself. I picked it up about 2 years ago, and I've been a designer for 10 years, and only when I started drawing on the iPad and playing around and exploring and using it for my work have I felt like this excited and this creative, and like this sketchnooning thing was just a hobby for me. I did it like at the Tableau conference in Seattle, like I guess that was a year ago, and then the Tapestry conference last year, and now I get paid to do this all the time. And it's like, I don't even understand how that happened, but it's all because of the iPad. And it's much more helpful to explain to you, or show you rather than explain to you how this works. So the 3 things that the digital drawing format is really exciting me about is, the first thing is drawing better. So this app is called Paper. It's by 53. And I don't work for them. I don't work for Apple. I'm just like really obsessed with these products. So drawing better. I can draw an incorrect shape, and it basically just auto-corrects it. It makes it look clean and like snaps it to the shape that it needs to be. So these look much better than my actual drawings on paper would look. The next thing is like drawing faster. So I'm going to move these over. So I think there's about 100 people in this room today. And if I wanted to draw 100 people on a piece of paper, that would take me a while. But if I want to draw 100 people on my iPad, I can just duplicate 1 10 times. I think that's 10. Okay, thank you. And then duplicate this 10 times. One, two, three, four, 5. All right, we're going to do 110 people or 120 people. There we go. So I can do that really, really fast, and it's not perfect, but I don't have to worry about like wasting time drawing ideas. It just comes up to me really quickly. So now the next thing is that it makes me more adventurous. So I just want to do a quick poll of the room. Who here has an iPad? Okay, that's like a lot. That was surprising. I was expecting it to be like 50%, but it's more like 80%. Okay, and then who here uses their iPad for drawing? All right, that's a much smaller ratio. I would say it's about this many people, rough estimate. So the question that I'm exploring in my work is, is the iPad, once people like learn about these tools and recognize how easy it is to use and to learn, is this number in maybe 1 or 2 years going to look something more like this? Like most people are working on iPads, and then many more people are using them for drawing. And kind of that's the hope that I have. And you can see like I just created a really silly, simple visualization, but it took me 2 seconds, and I did it in front of an audience, so no pressure, but I'm like proud of myself for that. So, I mean, this is what I'm really excited about, what I'm exploring in my work, and if you guys have questions, I can nerd out on this all day long, so if we don't have time for all of them right now, I'm happy to answer others later.
Have you tried an iPad Pro?
Yes, this is an iPad Pro that I'm using now.
At what point in your creative process do you start looking at the data itself? Because oftentimes I'll start with a sketch of some ideas and then plug in the data and find it doesn't really fit the chart that I had in mind. It just doesn't work for that particular data. So at what point do you start injecting that into your creative process?
So I guess it depends. A lot of times like, we're going to execute this in Tableau because that's what my client has and that's what they want. In which case, like, I'll spend, a little bit at the very beginning, initial phases, looking into that. For some of the projects that are more open-ended, like if it ends up as a drawing, I just never even look at data. I just guess what it is and create like an illustration that's not based on any fact. But I would say it's helpful whenever you get to the point where you're like, this could go really wrong if I've gotten so far down this line and so many people are excited about the idea and I'm still not sure if it works. That's kind of, I would never want to get to that point in a project where then we have no time to turn back and keep iterating. You know what I mean?
Just a couple more questions here, but this is Ben, and hey, maybe it would be nice if when you ask your question, just say who you are so that the folks online can also know who's asking. So go ahead, Steve.
This is Steve Fenn. So for those of us who are unfortunate enough to be stuck with an Android tablet, do you have an app that you've heard of that you'd recommend, or does anybody else in the room?
So most people I know use, I think it's called like OneNote for the Android, or some version of Photoshop if you have a Surface. But I think others might have other ideas. I'm working on that in my research because I think that's one of the biggest limitations is this platform is only iOS right now. Why isn't it a barrier? Well, it could be if you have notifications on and you have, sometimes I don't have self-control and I'll just like go look at Google on my tablet. But I just use it as the same way as a piece of paper. I just treat it as an analog tool that has some really cool features to it. And then those kind of dangers of being in a digital distraction, they don't really apply.
Hi, my name is Lynn Weatherall, and I noticed you were using a stylus. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite one or a top three?
Yes. Top one is the Apple Pencil. It's expensive, though. So the second one would be the 53's pencil stylus, which is like half the price.
Okay, we got a few more presentations here, so let's give another round of applause for Catherine Madden.